evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. A quick recap for those who have not seen this show. This is an initiative where we felt that there are so much knowledge, out there in many different topics covering economic, social, political dimension. Out there in the global arena, in the regional setting, even in the national setting. And this show will try to extract, from personality who are experienced, who are expert in their own right, in their own life, in their own career, in their own society, how can their experience of so many years of practice could be put into a context where the Cambodian society, the Cambodian academic, the Cambodian business community, the policymaker of this country could learn from this vast experience. And hopefully this experience could be translated somehow into some economic opportunity, into some sort of policy development, policy implementation. And at the end, Cambodia will be better off with one or two good new ideas. Today, the theme of our show is about the development of commercial law in Cambodia. And we have the pleasure to have with us today a very well-known legal scholar who's been in Cambodia for quite a while, Mr. Martin Desautels. Martin, bonjour, bonsoir, je dirais. Martin, welcome to the show. Before we go on the actual substance of our discussion, perhaps you can share with the audience a bit about your background, your legal background, your country background, which is very important, but also in the context of your regional background, in the legal field here.
Thank you, Siphana. Thank you for inviting me here first. I'm very honored to be able to join your show. In terms of legal background, I graduated from Quebec, which is in Canada, university there. Worked a bit as you before in politics in Quebec and in Canada, and then went on to study international banking and finance at London School of Economics. From there, I came straight to the region here, first in Vietnam, and started in the early 2000 to come to Cambodia. Not full-time base here, but on doing some contract. That's where we had the chance to meet. And so from there on, I say Cambodia grew on me. And in 2002, I came over here on a full-time basis. And I stayed here 4 or 5 years on a full-time basis. I'm still come here, I still have a house here, so I still quite active practice here. But now we have more offices, so I move a bit around the offices. One of the first contract, in fact, I had the chance to do was with you on WTO accession, which was help you to prepare Cambodia to accede the WTO, notably what would be the impact on the legal framework for Cambodia.
Well, Martin, these are once again memory lane. I just came back from Ethiopia, sharing experience of negotiation to enter WTO with the government of Ethiopia. And in fact, come to think about it, it's been 6 years already, a little bit more than 6 years since Cambodia entered WTO. Our parliament ratified in 2004. But it's interesting that when we met each other in year 2000, you were helping the Ministry of Commerce, the government of Cambodia, to look at what would be the legal framework, what would be needed in terms of the commercial legislation that will be needed to put in place. And it's interesting that we did have part of our accession a national legislative action plan, meaning what are the various laws that we have to put as part of our accession package. I think some of the legislation was passed, was adopted, ratified before accession, but there's a whole other area, some 40 plus law that needed to be passed after the accession. Perhaps you have been here for 10 years already. You see the progression of the commercial law development. What is your impression in the last decade or so?
First, when people were asking me in 2004, 2005, what will be the impact of Cambodia acceding WTO, I had to scratch a bit my head because the market was quite liberal already. Most sectors were open, which usually is the main impact of WTO, is commitment to open the market But Cambodia was pretty open, was one of the most liberal country in terms of legal framework in the region. And after looking at the list of the laws and regulation that Cambodia committed to pass once they would access WTO, that's where I said that's going to be the main impact, is that the WTO will spearhead a full commercial legal framework for Cambodia. Already work had been done before, long commercial enterprise, some law related to copyright and trademarks, but the bulk of it was going to come afterwards, notably the secure transaction law.
Yes, which was passed.
The financial leasing law, which has been passed.
Yes.
And notably, as you mentioned at the beginning, the commercial contract law,
Yes.
which we're helping now the Ministry of Commerce to work on.
Yes. So the development of a commercial contract is very critical because as now we are a full-blown member of WTO, a very active player in the ASEAN, ASEAN plus China, ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand, ASEAN, India, and in 4 years' time, we'll be a member of the ASEAN Economic Community. There'll be a free flow of investment, free flow of labor, free flow of business opportunity. I see here a big impact on that particular law, which is a commercial contract, because you will see Cambodia looking to enter into a joint venture with a foreigner. Foreigner will be looking to Cambodia for partnership, and this will set the stage. They will set the legal framework, the basis for them to have a clear, transparent rule of the game. And I think it will help catalyze the development. But Martha, in this context, you as being a managing partner of this law firm in Cambodia, the FDL, but you also have the many different offices in the region. What do you see the regional trend as related to FDI and this sort of law that will have an impact?
First, we see more and more companies have a regional approach. So they're looking at ASEAN as a region now, and not as individual countries. That's definitely the biggest trend we saw in the last 3-4 years. That's on that basis that we've developed this regional network. In Vietnam, in Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, we have 2 offices. We have offices in Myanmar, and we just opened up an office in Singapore. With this in mind, this regional integration, where we can service our client who are based often in different countries with a regional basis, either in Bangkok sometimes in Singapore, sometimes in Hong Kong, where we can service them as one region, one firm. Okay,
Yes.
so that's the biggest trend we've seen. So we see more and more ASEAN country investing in other countries. So
Intra flow.
exactly. So Indonesian investing in Cambodia, Vietnamese investing in Cambodia. We're starting also to see Cambodian investors starting to look outside Cambodia. The ones that have been pretty successful are starting to look at other possibility of investment. So we're seeing a much larger integration than when I initially come here, where people were a lot country focused or country centered, and now it's really developing, and the development of the ASEAN, as you said, will help developing this even further.
Well, we have to go to a bit the specificity of this famous draft commercial contract law. I mean, it's still in draft format. My understanding is right now in the middle of discussion with the Council of Jurists, with the ECOSOC, so pretty much at the level of the Office of Council Minister. So, of course, it's work in progress. It's a very thick, voluminous draft. Maybe you can cover a bit the fundamental point of that particular draft.
You're right. It's still under work, so we cannot go in much detail. But in general, I mean, there's been a public workshop on the commercial contract law. So, generally speaking, the objective of the law it's not to supplement the civil code. It's not to replace the civil code that will come into force. We hope during 2011, but to complement it. So we ensured while drafting the law that the commercial contract law would be in adequation with the civil code and with other laws of Cambodia. So we've
Yes.
looked at all the laws of Cambodia that could possibly impact commercial transaction, and we ensure that they are either referred here or ensure that we're not in that we're in compliance with these different laws.
Yes.
This being said, commercial transaction is a specific field which needs in most countries to have a specific law and specific, I would say, sectoral framework
Yes.
for certain specific contract. The commercial law, contract law will essentially govern mainly transaction between merchant.
Merchant, yes.
There's a few transactions between a merchant and non-merchant that have been covered here, with our essential that be covered, but the general principle is between merchants. So two businessmen or two companies doing a contract between each other, they will be covered by the scope of the commercial contract law.
Businessmen trade, there is a very strong component on, international trade transaction, sales of goods, across border, Incoterm, quite a bit of this technical dimension.
Yeah.
Good. Well, you being from Canada, and therefore you should be a good example of somebody who can appreciate the difference between civil code law and commercial code. And I'm glad you mentioned that this particular draft is not aimed to is more to supplement the work of the civil code, right, and code of civil procedure. To a lot of non-lawyer, the difficulty sometimes, the confusion is that people say, oh, but Cambodia is a civil law country. But you guys are working not just on this particular draft. Even when I was in Ministry of Commerce, we were saying, oh, but there's going to be a conflict of law, civil law, common Anglo-Saxon law. In this context, do you see any such tension?
The way we've drafted it, and you're right that this debate has been going on, civil law, Anglo-Saxon law. I think, frankly speaking, I've always said to both Anglo-Saxon and civil lawyer, I think it's a false debate.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a matter of how you draft it and that your legal principle do not contradict with each other. The basic naturally is civil law, but nothing prevents you from inspiring yourself from an Anglo-Saxon law in another domain, as long as it doesn't contradict the basic principle that you would find in civil code or the commercial contract law. So I don't really see this tension as long as when you prepare the law, you ensure that you're not contradicting other laws or the principle. That's the basic for me.
Yes.
That's why when we prepared this, we reviewed all the laws of Cambodia, and different sections of the law inspired from different jurisdictions.
Yes.
So from Canada.
Yeah.
From Canada. So a few sections are inspired from Canada. Some from some European code.
Okay.
Also, some from the French system.
Okay.
Some from previous draft of the commercial law.
Yes.
And generally speaking, it's been inspired from our basic understanding of the commercial transaction and commercial trend in Cambodia. That's the most important. Okay, but all in that equation, especially with the civil code.
Yes.
So I don't think it's contradictory. I think, frankly speaking, it's probably a false debate.
It's a false debate.
And that now that we have pretty much a good idea of the framework, we move on from this debate and more see how we can implement these different laws, which are most of them do not contradict each other, and implement them in an efficient manner.
Yeah.
That should be the focus.
And I would say that in a very globalized world where being a member of the WTO, we've pretty much been multilateralized. Many of these legal economic concepts, I think many of our transactions has somehow a norm behind, an international norm behind. If you're talking about intellectual property, for example, you have the whole TRIP agreement behind, so it doesn't matter if it's trademark or copyright, whatever. And I think in the sales of goods also there's a convention there, the arbitration, there's the New York Convention. So in that context, I agree with you. The Anglo-Saxon civil law debate was the talk of the 90s, of the early 90s, where it was really it's like in front of the Royal Palace, they have the river, the four rivers coming together, the confluence. You are not sure which one will overtake which one. But I'm glad in a way that after, this almost nearly 2 decades of legal soul searching, Cambodia come to term and with practitioner. I mean here practitioner, because you could have academic who is very good at certain theory and who, I must say, in the early day, in the mid-90s, they are very, very, defensive of a different legal system. But now you see with the businessman coming in, with the practitioner, they want to see a solution. And they want to say, okay, now, I'm from Singapore, I'm from Australia, I'm going to enter into a contract, a joint venture with a Cambodian guys who's doing good, who have no clue about Anglo-Saxon. He was brought up in a French civil system, but guys, let's figure out a way that we can transact. And this is something that I really look forward to see such that law coming out. And then from there, we will set the stage. But one more question. We do have an old contract law, which is Decree 38. What will happen?
What will happen? First, we've put a transitional provision in the law. So the contract previously from the law, they should stay valid and on the basis of that law.
Yes.
So normally what would happen is that the contract, the previous contract law, from the date of promulgation of the commercial contract law would no longer be in application. I'm not sure if it's going to be with the civil code or with this, and then all new transactions will be governed by the new legal framework. Previous transaction, so at the same time, it's not valid for the future, but you need still to keep the old contract law for the previous contract, which were governed by this contract.
Yes.
A general principle, and you've drafted a lot of law, is that you don't try to make a law retroactive.
Yes.
Because it's unfair for the party.
Exactly.
And as you said, if a Singaporean has signed a joint venture contract with a Cambodian company here or a Cambodian businessman under the previous contract law, he doesn't want to see the contract being changed because there's a new law that passed. That's a general principle, what we call of certainty, which is important. And you're right in underlying that for the Singaporean or for other investors or Australian that want to invest here, civilist, Anglo-Saxon, it's not that important for them.
Yes.
They're not lawyers.
Yes.
They're not legal scholar. What's important for them is the certainty. When they sign a contract, they want to know what they're signing, in what framework are they signing this contract. That's the fundamental question for them. Is it transparent? Is it clear? Do I know what I'm signing? And do my counterparty, if it's a Cambodian businessman, all know what we're signing together? And that will be able, in a transparent way, comply with the obligation of the contract and of any law that would come as a framework to this contract.
If we mention contract, we mention people entering into business together, and of course, some business will fall apart, and we'll be talking about contract breach, we're talking about lawsuit, we're talking about enforcement. How do you see, in the context of this draft commercial law, how do you see the linkage toward the more downstream effect of contract enforcement? People will go to commercial arbitration. We are working now on the formation of the first commercial arbitration center, a national one. So that is something quite, I would say, hopeful, not in the short term, but perhaps in medium term, because it takes a while for the center to take life. It takes a while for the young Cambodian arbitrator to get accustomed, to get, I like to say Cambodian commercial arbitrator is like it's like wine, bottled in 2011. It will take a while before it become, a Grand Cru, become, a good wine that you can fetch $1,000 bottle. But the main thing is that we bottle them. They are there. Enforcement. Tell me a bit about how you view the challenge.
What we always advise our client is that when you prepare your initial contract, for example, with a joint venture partner in Cambodia, be sure that both parties, you and your Cambodian counterpart, understand very well the contract. That it's transparent, that you spell out quite clearly what are the obligations of each other.
Yeah.
to avoid any conflict. The
Yes.
objective of a good contract in a commercial contract law
Yeah.
is not to go to conflict.
Yes.
That's the basic thing. Once you go to conflict, then the commercial transaction is affected. Both businessmen often will lose if there's a conflict that arises. So that's the first advice we always give is try to be clear from the start in order to avoid any pitfalls or any possible dispute
Yes.
with your party. In that circumstances, what the law will allow is a clearer and more transparent framework. Therefore, both parties will know more what are their obligations or what are their rights. So before going into a conflict, so there's less gray area.
Yeah.
Gray area is usually not good. That's what arise for give ground often for conflict. So that's the first basis. That in terms of implementation, it will be easier, I would say, that if there is a conflict, that it's clear that there's a conflict or there's a breach of an obligation of one of the two parties.
Yes.
Okay. So both parties will not. It might lessen the amount of dispute.
Yes.
Because the legal framework is clearer and because the contract will be clearer based on the new framework. After that, if it goes, it happens.
Yes.
Okay. We're generally not handling this. It's Cambodian lawyer who are handling this. In this case, is the commercial contract law links a lot with the commercial court law.
Yes.
That is supposed. It's a draft. It's still in
Yes.
a draft. So it makes a lot of link on how you go from your contract to then go on a dispute procedure, either arbitration,
Yes,
foreign
yes.
arbitration, so outside Cambodia, Singapore, Hong
Yeah,
Kong.
yeah.
In Cambodia, with the new arbitration center that will be coming up, we hope that will be thriving and
Yes.
that a lot of people will be choosing this as a dispute resolution, either a foreign arbitration or domestic arbitration. And if they haven't chosen this, then they go to the domestic court.
Yes,
At
yes.
this stage, it would be the common court
Yes.
until the
To the formation of a commercial
court.
which we are bound to establish at some point in time. In fact, we're even late because as part of our commitment, we promise, we commit that
Yep,
we have a commercial
definitely.
court. But again, that is not within the purview of our discussion. But I do feel that nonetheless, dispute will arise. But the main thing is that this, thick draft commercial law there will set the base
Yep.
for people to understand their right and their obligation. And hopefully with good legal advice, both from Cambodia side as well the foreign investor side, we could generate from the economic development perspective more momentum to attract more foreign direct investment to come to this country. We're going to come to the end of our show soon, but Martin, your last few words, your last thought. How you see it, how you want it to see it happen in the near future.
What I hope with this, once this commercial contract law is adopted by the Parliament, is that, as you said, it will give more certainty.
Yes.
So when lawyers will advise their foreign clients to come in here, they'll be able to say, look, this is what you can expect here.
Yes.
Okay, that reassures foreign investors.
Yes.
The more sophisticated one, notably, are reassured by it. The big
Yes.
companies
Yes.
are reassured. The big international companies are reassured, hearing this from their advisors, saying, "Look, if you invest here, here are your rights, here are your obligation. You have a clear framework." That's what we hope that we'll be able to achieve with this commercial contract law. And at the end, everybody will benefit because there'll be more FDI, more foreign direct investment inflow to Cambodia, more joint venture partners for Cambodian businessmen, and generally for the service area, more work for all of us that help foreign investor investing here in Cambodia.
Well, great, Martin. I want to say thank you for coming to share with us these few thoughts. But I would wrap up by saying that we entered WTO in 2004, and as a least developed country, we are subject to a regular review, in this case every 6 years. So this year, Cambodia will be facing, I wouldn't say a tribunal, but Cambodia will be facing the scrutiny of membership, WTO membership, in terms of reviewing our policy, our commitment. When we enter WTO, we're supposed to do this. And I am pretty sure that the progress on this particular commercial contract law will help us reassure the membership of WTO, that Cambodia is fully committed to its commitment. We're making progress. Certain things take a little bit slower because it's the process, the procedure. There's nothing you can do about that. But at the end of the day, you know, to me it's more than just meeting the obligation. To me is how do we use certain tools, and this is one of the tools, to give assurance to the foreign community that Cambodia is a place to come, that they should come to do business, that they will be treated equally, fairly, transparently, like any other country. And ultimately, it can help this government, it can help this economy to compete for more resources to come. And in the context of this sort of like you know, we coming out of this global financial crisis, this year I feel the vibe of the economy. I feel people come back, the interest in the region are rebounding. And this one more tool we can say, look, you know, come and do a joint venture with a Cambodian businessman. There's a framework, you guys will be comfortable. So that's how I would like to close this show, by saying that it's good development. We need to pursue further. And there are other items which I hope to invite you next time on other essential, you know, commercial dimension like that, and perhaps more on the legal aspect of doing business in Cambodia. That will be the topic of our next meeting next time. But otherwise, again, Martin, thank you so much for coming. So, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, fortunately we're coming to the end of our show. 30 minutes is too short for me, but I hope to see you all next week. Thank you and good night.